I am a self-identified late bloomer. And if you're a late bloomer as well, I'm sure you can relate to at least some of what I'm about to say. We live in a society that fetishizes success, and especially success at a young age. And within this climate, we can feel so much anguish, especially when we see people our age, whether it's in our lives or on the internet, hitting those developmental or life milestones like buying a house or getting into a relationship, getting married, having children, um, earning a lot of money, all that kinds of things. It really can trigger comparison and trigger a lot of anguish and self-blame. I've fallen victim to this as well, and in fact, maybe I fall victim to this every single day. But I just wanted to share some thoughts that have helped me anchor myself, um, and tap into that radical acceptance of where I am, be grateful for what I have and what I have accomplished, and keep my eye on the future and keep moving forward. The first thing I would say to become aware of is whether or not you have the tendency to have a very narrow attention focus when it comes to evaluating yourself and other people. I know it almost sounds cliche, but when we are comparing ourselves to other people, we're often focusing on their wins, their strength, and their successes, and completely disregarding maybe other areas in which they are struggling as well, and that we may be doing better than them. If you grew up with a lot of adversity, if you grew up in a family environment where your strength, your talent, your achievements are not celebrated, you maybe don't have that habit of celebrating your own success and giving yourself credit for what you've done well, what you've accomplished. And I think that no matter who you are and where you are at in life, there are probably a lot of these things, these gems hidden within you that you just neglect to acknowledge sometimes. And it can be very intangible things. It can be introspection, it can be kindness, it can be generosity, it can be moral integrity, it can be being a reliable friend, it can be creativity, artistic expressions, imagination, a lot of things. And even though the world does not necessarily give you external rewards for that, it doesn't mean that those things are not precious and valuable. It means that you need to be the custodian of those things. You need to be the inner parent, so to speak, and validate those things about yourself. That brings me to the next point, which is really contextualizing it, contextualizing your life. What has happened that led you to this place, led you to feel stuck, led you to feel stagnant? Really have a little examination of your autobiography, of the narratives of your life, and think about what adversities have you encountered that are really outside of your control. Our family of origin is a really big one. I think when we think about early successors, of course, there are those who are from ordinary families and maybe they become very lucky or they're very extremely innately talented and they just, hit it off big the first time. But a lot of those figures of success that we fetishize, I'm thinking celebrities and, elite athletes, those people who make it big at a very young age. What is one thing that distinguishes them? They probably never really had the need to figure out what it is that they're doing in life, right? Like musicians that are born in the family of musicians, actors who are born in the family of actors. It's almost like their fates are predetermined. It's very clear what it is that they need to pursue, and they're set up for that. They're set up for success. Not that that's necessarily an enviable position to be in. I think it's also an immense privilege and freedom to come into this world as a blank slate, as kind of a formless piece of clay, and to be the master of our own fate, and to have a hand in kind of crafting our own personality and our own journey, our own destiny. But that process also takes time, right? The ordinary person spends the first 18 years of life just going to school. And depends on your resources and, how your parents were. Maybe they really didn't give you the lesson about, the importance of thinking ahead, thinking about your future and taking conscious steps each and every day to craft that future. And so maybe you just went through the first 18 years being a child, being yourself. And so when you get to adulthood, you kind of lack that foundation of knowing where you want to be and knowing what your action plan is. And therefore, you are delayed in that growth process. Speaking of family as well, maybe this is more idiosyncratic. Maybe this is just me, but I feel like some of you would realize this as well. I'm a first generational immigrant, and my parents, when I was growing up, they were very preoccupied with survival, providing me with kind of like the basic material provisions without really giving me guidance about how to make decisions, how to navigate the different challenges of life, so that I always had to make decisions independently. And me being a kid and not knowing, how the world works, etc., probably made a lot of wrong decisions, and I suffer the consequences for it. And then I find that now I have descended into a horrible, horrible decision paralysis where I cannot trust my intuition, where I cannot make decisions for myself. Like every decision I make are attacked with so much anxiety and paranoia. And it really burns a lot of me on the inside. It really consumes me when I know that rational analysis and information gathering can only get you so far, and fundamentally you just have to deal with the unknown and take the leap and then, deal with things as they come. But I just still find myself frozen, paralyzed, and probably wasting a lot of time because of that. So I don't know if you relate to this, or is it just a thing about me? But I'd love to hear what you think of that. And besides, upbringing and family, there are so many other related contextual factors. That's why I'm telling you to really examine your life and think about the barriers and obstacles that you have faced. Are the odds stacked against you from birth? I study psychology, and we talk about this concept of temperament. Basically, at birth, babies already react differently, right? Some are more shy and inhibited. Some are more open, brave, curious, and inquisitive. And some just are kind of more prone to negative emotions. Like these are cards that we were dealt with that we simply have no control over, and they have very long-lasting and pervasive consequences throughout basically the rest of our lives. So that's one thing to consider. Systemic barriers. There are so many aspects of a person's identity that could pose tangible barriers to success, like your gender, your race, your socioeconomic status. In the environment where individual merit is so emphasized, and of course individual merit and how hard we work, how much resolve we have, how much perseverance we have, does play a role, and they do have the power to influence our fate. But external factors also count. And even those internal factors, where do they come from? They come from our biology, they come from our upbringing. So then, in a sense, so much of where we're at, our fate, are outside of our control. And that is one thing that really struck me when I started studying psychology. Another thing is luck. Sometimes people would say, oh, don't fall for that victim mindset. Don't blame your circumstances. Don't blame your biology. Don't blame your race, your gender. And they point to people who come from very disadvantaged backgrounds, but then achieve success as, examples of why we shouldn't have that victim mentality, so to speak. But really, luck is a considerable factor that's at play. And people who succeed when they retrospect and look at the past that led to their success, they often downplay luck. This is just human nature. We want to boost our ego, we want to take credit, right? And also, there's an effect called survivor bias. We only know about the success cases, we only know about the survivors. We never hear about the people who come from, similar circumstances and maybe even exhibited similar merits. But then they don't make it and we don't hear about them, right? So who you compare yourself to are only those kind of the visible cases. The last point I like to make is to really consider and be mindful of how your self-blame and self-criticism is hindering you, it's hurting you. One thing that I learned through studying psychology, actually this is from Dr. K specifically, it's helped me so much, is the 2-arrow technique or 2-arrow principle, and I think it's from Zen Buddhism. Basically what it says is that there are suffering that is just an inescapable, inevitable aspect of life, and then suffering that is self-imposed, right? It's suffering that comes from our reaction to the first kind of suffering. So I don't know, I make a silly mistake. I buy tickets at the movie, and when the cashier says, enjoy the movie, and I say, you too. And, I make a mistake. It's inevitable. I'm human. But then if I keep beating myself up for it, for days later, I actually do have like embarrassing stories like that. But yeah, if I keep beating myself for it, and like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. How could I have done that? I'll never recover from this. All of those negative self-talk that we impose on ourselves, that creates just an additional layer of pain. Be mindful of your inner dialogue, your inner monologue, and how that is affecting you. And think about it this way, like when you're feeling bad about yourself, you're less likely to approach, right? You're less likely to be active, put yourself out there, put in 100% of your effort. Like it really has to start with inner confidence and self-love and self-compassion. Those are my thoughts about being a late bloomer. I think at the end of the day, it all just boils down to radical acceptance of where you're at, gratitude for what you have and what you have accomplished, the strength that you have exhibited despite the adversity, and then just staying grounded in the present and strategize, be brave, take a leap, iterate. So I will just leave you with a suggestion for something that you could do, and I'm gonna take my own medicine and I'm gonna try and do this as well. But maybe create a little timeline of your life, create a little flow chart, factors that have kept you back, right? Whether it's your upbringing, whether it's your parents' unavailability, lack of affirmation, or even, God forbid, my heart goes out to you, active abuse, any kind of interpersonal trauma as you're growing up, any kind of major adversities like illnesses, accidents, natural disasters, those kind of setbacks. List them out and don't feel guilty about doing this and blaming those things for where you're at. I think it's just true. Like in some sense, it's just true. But the second part of that is it does not take away from the fact that you have control over your fate. Like one favorite saying that I learned in studying psychology is it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility, right? So really hold that both sides of that inside of you. They're not mutually contradictory. They're perfectly consistent with each other. So number one, create a timeline of your obstacles and setbacks. And I would say number two is to create a timeline of every time you have survived, you have recovered, you have healed, you have persisted, you problem solved despite the odds being stacked against you despite all of these adversities that you're facing. That should hopefully let you know how strong you are and how much potential you have, and hopefully spur you on to action. I hope this is helpful, or at least entertaining or informative to some extent. I'd love to hear what you think. I'm still a young-ish person, still learning, still growing. I still have many things to learn, but these are some of the reflections that I have had going through life that has really helped me. And yeah, I look forward to hearing your thoughts and seeing you next time.